future. Stepping out of your past, stepping into the future. The future's here and now, you will be free, be free. The word I've got is all you need. Be free, be free. Jesus is the way of destiny.
Well, Father God, we just come before you right now into this edition of Stepping into the Future from the Holy Land, and we just ask you right now to come and inundate us with your presence. Father, I'm so pleased today to introduce our guest, Father Eamon Kelly, and I'd like to introduce you to the whole world today.
Thank you, Bob.
We've had, by providence, we've met, and we've got something very important to talk about, Magdala, and the center that's been built there and what's being done there. And so I just want to give you liberty and freedom to just begin to explain the archaeological aspects and importance of what's happening there right now.
Well, Bob, it's great to have you here this morning at Notre Dame in Jerusalem. And in a certain sense, the Magdala story starts here. 11 years ago, our community was requested by the Vatican, by the Holy See, to run this building here in Notre Dame where we're seated. And this is a wonderful place for pilgrims, as you have experienced.
Oh,
You've
yes.
come here and you've
Yes.
seen so many groups from all over the world. This morning we had people from Argentina, from Cote d'Ivoire in Africa, the Ivory Coast. We have people in the house from Mexico. We have a group of young people from Germany, and we have a group of priests from all over the world. We even have a Korean seminarian here at the moment. So we have, in a way, the whole world, and we
All
have
nations.
about 30% of our guests are not Catholic. Majority of these are Protestant, of different colors and shapes and sizes. And then we have Greek Orthodox coming here, Armenians, we have Jews for Shabbat, we have Muslims coming here for NGO meetings. It's amazing the variety of people. Even a group of atheists once, that we had a great encounter with them. It was just really, our program doesn't have time to deal with that this morning. We had some wonderful experience.
But I loved our conversation this morning. I loved the commonality that you've provided us and introduced us to. And so on that note, I'd like us to just have the freedom to say whatever's in your heart today.
Yeah, well, wonderful. So this experience of precisely commonality that we have here in Notre Dame seemed to be the formula for us to develop a similar center of hospitality for people visiting the Holy Land, visiting Israel, to experience the great diversity of faith and yet the great goodness we all share in this. And so people come here and they walk where Jesus walked, they walk where Abraham walked, and they just feel the gospel, they feel the Bible, it comes alive. And then hospitality is a very important part of that, not just having walls and a roof and a bed and food, but also people to encounter and to meet.
Yes,
And this makes a big difference. So it's not like providing just a hotel, it's providing, in a certain sense, a community, a living touchstone of the goodness we have from all this history. And our community was, the leadership, as we came here 11 years ago, was inspired to look at Galilee also as a place for this kind of experience. And one thing led to another. It would be a long story to tell you all the details that happened here, but we ended up in Galilee, at the Sea of Galilee, in a place called Magdala. We see here we have the Capernaum, Bethsaida, the Mount of Beatitudes, and this is where the boat was found from 2,000 years ago, some 25, 30 years ago. And then we were blessed to find a piece of land in Magdala, the town of Mary Magdala. And the Franciscans had started here actually 100 years earlier, and they were blessed to acquire a wonderful piece that was really the old historical core of Magdala, that had all the levels of archaeology 1700 years, going back to the time of the successors of Alexander the Great, the Hellenic time, when they dominated this region. And then the Romans came, so there remains in that archaeological site from that period. Then the Byzantine period, when it becomes Christian publicly. and then all of the Arab periods of the Arab conquest right up to the Turkish period, and even the Crusader wedge in between. So the Franciscan site here is very rich in archaeology. So we knew that we would have to deal with this as we made plans, and we planned to have this space here for 300 guests who could stay with us for dining, for prayer. And we even actually planned a special place so that all of those who were not Catholic, all the Western Christians especially, could have a special chapel for them. And God said no. He said never on his watch. Well, actually, that's just my funny way of saying that here we found a synagogue.
Exactly, which is what brought us together today.
And we would not put a chapel on top of a synagogue. It wouldn't be the right thing to do for many reasons.
Right.
But this synagogue is very special because it's dated to the year 67 as its closing. So that means it existed in the 1st century and was out of action before the temple was destroyed. That's very special.
It is very special. Now, you found something very particular there, which was, what, the oldest menorah.
Right, you're jumping the gun on me here, Bob.
Okay, I won't jump the gun.
That's okay.
I'm so intrigued by this. I'm so fascinated by this.
So let's have the people look into the synagogue here. We'll have to go there and film at Magdala as well on your next visit or second visit.
We will in September, sir.
So here we have a double row of seating inside the center of the synagogue space. This is about 1,200 square feet. And here we have mosaic and fresco. And you can, this pillar was actually lying down here protecting this stone. It was lying about 6 inches or 4 inches over the level of the stone. And we stood it up here, created this whole three-dimensional take on the synagogue. It was a wonderful moment when we stood that up. And then we found fresco, and this stone, which is carved on all sides. So we'll talk about these things in a moment. And then we have, meanwhile, excavated a lot of this whole area, and it's still only 10% of the site, 15% of the site. So we have
Certainly
12 more acres to dig. So if you have friends who want to come, people who view your show, they are welcome. We need a lot of help. We've had over 1,200 volunteers doing this work for the last 6 years. So 6 years ago, when it was announced, the big sensation was that the synagogue had frescoes and mosaic. The mosaic are little stones, 3 colors, dark or black, white, and then there's an ochre reddish color here in the center of the wheel, so to say, of the outer rim of the rosette, and here in the center also in the hub. This is actually the 3rd of its kind in the country, in the areas in the 1st century. There's one in Herod's Palace and the Southern Palace in Masada. There's one in the Old Upper City here in Jerusalem, and then this is in Galilee. And it was extraordinary. Nobody ever anticipated finding this, and then we found it in a synagogue.
Certainly.
So this made this synagogue very special. And then we have this fresco, and now studies have shown, there's been a 60-page study just published in Italian, and experts have shown that this fresco, which is paint applied when the plaster is still fresh, is identical almost to the detail, except for some details, to a fresco in a pagan temple in Pompeii, which leads some specialists here to consider Magdala as the Pompeii of Israel. It's a little much, but it actually is contemporary to Pompeii, and very interesting from that point of view. So this, in all humility, then, you know, we are taught that humility is truth. So we have to say this is the most beautiful synagogue from the 1st century. There are 7 of them.
Yes.
But actually this synagogue is also unique in that it is the first synagogue ever excavated from where Jesus walked from his time. And what do we remember from the Gospels?
Well, from the Gospels, I mean, he walked the earth during the time of 30.
Around this time.
And
he walked in this area because Magdala is on the path from Nazareth to Capernaum.
To the fishermen as well.
And nowadays they have introduced 2 trails called the Jesus Trail and the Gospel Trail, 2 Israeli initiatives. And so you can walk from Nazareth like Jesus did to Capernaum and Bethsaida along the Sea of Galilee. And both trails have different routes, but they both come out at Magdala. So that means Magdala was on that route. It's the natural walking route. So we have the first synagogue excavated and open to the public now, which was on the route where Jesus walked from his time. And then Matthew 4:23, for example, says that Jesus taught in the synagogues and healed the sick there. Why don't we open up that verse and just read it?
Yes.
Matthew 4:23. And if you're at home and you have your Bible ready at hand, just open up Matthew 4:23. And there are many parallel passages that describe in similar words what Bob is just going to read for you now.
Yes, in Matthew 4:23 it says, "And Jesus went about all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all kinds of sickness and all kinds of disease among the people."
And this is the first synagogue now that we have like this. Isn't that amazing?
Yes, and on the very pathway, he would have encountered the people there. This potentially was being built by the very people that were there in that area during the time that he was walking on the earth.
Exactly. That's a very good point.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm so intrigued by this.
So we have found more things, but we want to talk about one more detail within the synagogue. We found a stone inside the synagogue, Bob. We found this stone, and here's from a lateral view, which is the same on the other side of the stone. And you can see that it's carved with detail, ornate. This is Mount Arbel in the background. We're right at the Arbel junction. And you see it has legs, and it's carved on all sides. We won't go in now because of time into all the details on this side, but I want to point out two other features on the stone. And here we have this view of the stone. We probably need a detail for folks to be able to see it better on the camera. But this is the oldest menorah ever found on stone.
It's absolutely stunning to see that right there.
Here you have the 7 branches and the stem, and here you have a tripod base, which is very interesting because there's been always a dispute about how the menorah should look. Also, if the branches should be semicircular or UV shaped. Now, remember, this menorah is sculpted before 67.
Yes.
The experts are saying in the 40s. The oldest menorah we have had up to now is on the Titus Arch in Rome, which was the place where the Romans commemorated their victory and the destruction of Jerusalem. And that has semicircular branches, which obviously became, in a certain sense, a gold standard for menorah design.
Certainly.
But now we have this one that's pre-temple destruction, and everything on this stone is related to the temple, according to the experts. So that means that the person who would have designed and crafted this menorah in this bas relief would have seen the original, or would have direct reports on how the original inside the temple looked. In fact, here you can also see the columns of the entry to the temple, Boaz and Joachim, which were the nicknames, and then there's an arch here. So we're like looking through an arch. If you look down through there, you can see beyond the door.
Yes.
So you're looking into a space. Now the menorah is not outside the temple, it's deep down inside. And then here, obviously for artistic reasons, it has to be on the periphery of the stone, on the outside of the stone, right? Now there's another detail here that's very interesting. On the back end of the stone, you'll have to get a bigger picture so you can see it more clearly, but here you have 2 wheels. This is the opposite end from the menorah. Maybe here you can see them better. And here you have 6. 6 is a very important number on the stone. There are 6 of a lot of things on the stone. Mm-hmm. So you have these arrows or triangles of stone under these wheels. So they're considered to be flames of fire.
Chariots of fire.
Chariot of fire. And how many chariots of fire have been found? This is the first one.
The first, I was going to say none.
On stone here.
Yeah.
And this is the oldest menorah ever found on stone. It's called sculpted on stone. And this is the only chariot of fire. I mean, if we just had one of those, we'd have been happy.
Yeah, but you got
more
it all.
than happy.
You got all, and you got all 4 views of all 4 sides. This is what people are looking at right now.
Yes, this is a very interesting image. Now we found other things in this excavation after the synagogue. The synagogue remains to this day the crown jewel of our discoveries, but we found some other very fascinating pieces, and one was this mikvah. A mikvah is a ritual purification bath. You know, from the scriptures that the Jews had different rites of purification with water, and really our baptism comes from that practice.
Yes.
So then you have these 7 steps, and you can see through the water to the steps.
Certainly.
That's groundwater that's coming in. There are 6 categories of water for purifications. If you rainwater, I think, is the least, or I'm not sure what number it is, but it's not the top priority. The top one is the spring type of water, and it's the only one they've ever found.
That's amazing. So this would actually tell us a little bit about the 6 water pots in John chapter 2, I believe it were. There was a wedding for.
And they used this water for ablutions, for purification.
Yes, according to the manner of the Jews for purification. So
Yes.
there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee.
Right.
And so they put out the 6 water pots according to the manner of purification. So this would be
I'm
indication.
not sure about that. I'm not an
Okay.
expert on that, but
I see.
it's possible that there's a relationship. But here, at least, we have this mikveh, and then there are 2 others. So the 3 mikvahot are all connected by little canals, and the water flows to them. And we'll have to go and visit this and see this, Bob.
Yes, we will.
Directly. And then underneath this roof, we found another mosaic. So it also has a rosette design over here, but it's in need of repair. Right now, it's covered for protection. And it has this meander design, like we have in the synagogue, just with also some variations from the
So
synagogue
this is the
design.
awning. This is the awning that you have prepared over this to protect it at the
Yes.
present time.
Right. So then we also found infrastructure for the fish processing industry.
That's fascinating.
It's
We
like a
talked
factory.
about this. Yeah.
And here you have a shaft going down that's very narrow, like a narrow stairwell that's steep, and about maybe 9 or 10 steps depending. And this shaft goes down, and you have these basins like sinks, kitchen sinks, bigger, smaller, shallower, deeper. And there are 5, 6, 7, or 8 of them around the mouth of this shaft. So they were able to bucket out the water and replenish the water that was evaporating and from the use. And they were tossing the fish there to pickle them. And we have found 10 units of this. So it's like an assembly line or a
Factory.
A factory,
Certainly.
exactly. And there, even some of them have very heavy paved streets into them, so they were probably also marketing it right there for the population, maybe going down with it to Tiberias or for the local communities in the area. And they were probably taking it to Rome through Caesarea Maritima. In fact, Flavius Josephus says that fish from Magdala, which was processed in Magdala, was sold in Rome. Now tie this into the fact that we have Jesus in the gospel accounts in the company of fishermen all the time.
And walking through the synagogue and teaching and preaching perhaps could have been really in that place right there, at the very place that this marketing would have gone to the nations of the world.
I'd like to take you one more step there in the archaeology discoveries, but it's transformed now into a different space. If we look at this picture here, Bob, here you see this is original floor. Everything else is added here, so abstract out all of this, but just this original floor. This is market space floor at the 1st century port in Magdala,
Where the fish would have been processed and sent out of.
where the fish were taken off the boats. And then who was going to be using that?
Well, the fishermen.
We know the names of some of them.
Yes.
Don't you know any names of fishermen in the 1st century?
I do.
We want to let the listeners and the viewers guess who they are.
We got Peter. Who else? We got John, James. We got
Peter had a brother.
we got the twin. We got Andrew. We got actually 7 of them that get in the boat in John chapter 21 and go out and catch 153
So then
fish.
we even know the name. And now if you're, and it says when they follow Jesus that they left their father and the workers. So
correct.
they had quite a team.
They had an infrastructure of a
fishing.
business in place.
And then they were taking it to this port for export
Yes.
to Rome. So it's an interesting, and at that time, let's say we go back to not the time when the synagogue was closed in 67, let's go back to, let's say, the 20s and 30s. Tiberias has been founded by Herod Antipas as the new capital for his part of the Tetrarchy. And so there's a lot of demand. There's a lot going on there. There's a boom in the economy. So there's a need for supplies, for food, for more infrastructure to satisfy that population. And then we have the port of Caesarea Maritima, which was, when Herod built it, the most beautiful and most important port of the Roman Empire. And that's probably, 2 days walk with mules across the Jezreel Plain by Megiddo out through the Iron Valley. And there you're at Caesarea Maritima. Now the boats can take that fish around to Corinth and to Rome and the other towns along the Mediterranean. So you begin to get a sense of the economy and the connections.
Quite a marketing
the
strategy.
lifestyle of that time, and also an explanation of how this synagogue could have been so ornate, and even these ritual purification baths. So there's a whole study in progress right now with all these experts and academics trying to integrate this new knowledge into the understanding of the time of Jesus and the generation after Pentecost.
Yes. This is all very, very fascinating. And you know what's interesting to me is it's, outside of your circle and what you guys are doing right now and what you've been working very hard at, it's probably very, very not known. It's not known around the world.
There's a lot to do. Quite a few reporters actually have covered it already, and different programs, even National Geographic and New York Times and CNN have done work in many Israeli publications. But it takes a long time for a message to really get to all the people.
Yes.
You're absolutely right.
Yes, I'm so wonderfully satisfied with what we're coming across with right now. There was something that we talked about earlier, a little bit earlier, that if we don't cover in this show, perhaps we can cover in the next show, and that was the columns of the women that were at a particular place that you've got here.
That's very interesting. We're in the town of Mary Magdala, so women have to be emphasized here, and their work in Jesus ministry. Obviously, the world talks about the fishermen and Jesus preaching, but these women played a very significant role.
They played a role in their support for him, and certainly they were not impoverished women. They were women who were of means, who supported him entirely and completely in his commission and what he was doing on the earth. And do we have time to go into that right now?
Well, maybe we'll do that in the second segment,
Okay.
but I was just thinking to comment on something else. Since you brought up the issue of the women, our excavation was assigned, we hired the Israeli Antiquities Authority to do this excavation because it was in view of the building of the whole hospitality center in Magdala. And the Israeli Antiquities appointed an archaeologist, and her name is Dina Avshalom Gurney. So there was a woman in charge of the excavation. And when we had the inauguration day in May last year, the Israeli Tourist Ministry was represented by a woman. And then they licensed us to dig the rest of the site with one of our universities in Mexico, the Anáhuac University. And it turns out there's a woman leading up that investigation. Then one of the architects of the new building was a lady, and then all the decoration was done by a lady from Latin America. So the women not only were there 2,000 years ago, but they're leading the effort at Magdala today in a very significant way.
It would seem to me that Holy Spirit is really emphasizing the women and their role in society.
There was another factor as well from 1st century to 21st century, similar to this. One of the managers of the construction that we've been doing actually reflected. He said, it's interesting that we have today working on the project, obviously Christians because we're there leading the whole thing, but Muslims and Jewish people working together. We have people who are secular, who are not very religious, also working with us there together. And he was reflecting on the Magdala that we've uncovered, because the Franciscan part that I mentioned earlier has more or less the ancient Greek hub of the town, the Hellenic period, right? And then we've found a very pious part of the town where we have the synagogue and the ritual purification baths. So we're looking at a population in that part of the town that's very religious. And it's interesting how that mix was there, and how we also have it in all of those who are working today
in the excavation itself.
In the excavation and also in the construction. So we have quite a variety. We've over 1,200 volunteers from maybe 30, 35 countries have helped us in the last 6 years. We found the synagogue in August 2009, and it was published in 2011. 2009 in the beginning of September. And then since then we've had all the other excavations, finding residential areas, market areas, the port, the fishing processing industry, the ritual purification baths, some mansions, over 2,000 coins, a Roman sword in its sheath.
That's awesome.
You tell this to a high school boy and he'll say, I want to go there and find one.
I want to go there and find one. Yeah.
And it's just no end to. We even found things for girls very interesting, eyebrow accoutrements for ladies' facial improvement.
Fascinating. Let me ask you a question, Father. When all these people are now working together hand in hand, and you've got volunteers that are also coming to volunteer their time from all these different nations. Tell us a little bit about the volunteer program. I mean, you've got a program there where people can actually come and volunteer.
Yes,
and,
we have volunteers usually for a month, and the majority are college students, but we had a young lady once from Chicago, and she was there for 6 weeks, and she was just 83 years old. But she had a great time, and I remember the following summer we had a man here, an Israeli from Beersheba, and he was 79, and he just loved it. There's actually a gentleman here, and is English and Israeli, a Jewish man, and he came in to volunteer, and he lives some of the year in England and some of the year in the Galilee, and he just loves it. He's part of it. It's amazing how many people come. We've had people of no faith come. We've had Christians come who were never baptized, and they decided they were going to get baptized in the Jordan or there in Galilee. It's amazing the path that people enter into, and sometimes who knows what the result is going to be. We're going to see that in heaven.
Amen. That's true. It's true. Well, Father, I know that we're coming to the end of our time today. We've got just about 1 minute left. If there was anything that you could say to anybody in the world that you want to say today, what would you say to them? I mean, there's the camera right there.
Well, 6 years ago, we had no idea what we were getting into, and we have all these surprises. We couldn't have planned it. We couldn't have got this bounty by our doing. So we could also ask, why has this been hidden for so long? And why does God want it today? So it's all in His providence, and there's a message here that we have a lot. When we look at this synagogue, who was praying there? Who was using it? Well, there were Jewish people, obviously, it's a synagogue. But then there were Jesus followers. And at that time, we weren't divided into Presbyterian and Methodist and Seventh-day Adventist and megachurch and Orthodox. We were one family of Jesus followers. So I think there's a huge call here for us to look at what we share, and also to see this time we were not yet separated from the Jewish people, so we are still deeply bonded with them in the first century. The separation hadn't happened as hard as it happened then later. And so there's a call to look at that, and I think here we have a great message of commonality, the word you were using there, Bob, earlier, that really speaks to the hearts of many people today. We need to get over so much prejudice and difficulty between our faith communities. We're not doing a hodgepodge. It's on a path of mutual discovery of who we are and how we can recognize the blessings each have and each has, and then the things we can do together and grow in a greater witness together to the one true God.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the program today, Father. I just appreciate you, and we're going to do another one, and we're going to come back and talk about some more fascinating things.
God bless you, Bob.
God bless you too, sir.
God bless the work you do.
Thank you.